make a start?
Yes.
Okay, as I said, I was just having a little conversation there as I got set up. Anyway, so I'm sorry for being late. It just took me 2.25 hours to get here from Chislehurst. It's solid. There was some big demonstration in Whitehall in Trafalgar Square, so all the roads were closed off there, and the roads were going through the West End were completely solid. I don't know, who was demonstrating?
Somebody these days.
Sorry? Somebody.
Somebody demonstrating.
Anyway.
The bankers.
The bankers are demonstrating, yeah. Bigger bonuses. All right, so we're looking now at Abraham's course. And so we looked at, the big picture is that God wants us to send the Messiah. So in order for God to be able to send the Messiah, somebody has to make the foundation of faith and the foundation of substance, to be able to create an environment in which the Messiah can be understood and can be accepted. And so God tried to do that in Adam's family, it didn't work. Tried to do it in Noah's family, didn't work. And so God found Abraham found God rather. And then God started working through Abraham. And we saw there how he wasn't able to restore the foundation of faith through his offering. And so God then gave him a second chance. Okay, so did we look at this last week? We did, didn't we? Yep. And we looked at that, and that, and that, and we were going to go on to this. So this is the second opportunity then that Abraham has to restore the foundation of faith. So the foundation of faith was supposed to have been established by Adam and Eve. And Adam and Eve should have had faith in God's commandment, or God's word. They should have united with God's commandment and trusted in God, but they didn't. And so this foundation of faith that Adam and Eve should have made needs to be restored. And so Abraham wasn't able to restore it because he didn't make the offering correctly. And so he has a second chance then to restore the foundation of faith. So this time God has Abraham do something which is more difficult. If God asked Abraham to do the same thing again, do you think he would have got it wrong the second time round? No. So, in that case, do you think Satan wouldn't have been satisfied with him to get a second chance to restore the foundation of faith just in the same way? So in order for God to be able to allow Abraham to restore the foundation of faith, Satan said, okay, he can do it, but this time he has to offer something much more difficult. And so this time, the agreement was that Abraham could restore the foundation of faith if he would offer his son Isaac as a burnt offering. So God said to Abraham, take your son, your only son, whom you love, and offer him as a burnt offering. So Abraham rose early in the morning. So it's a bit shocking, that, isn't it?
What?
Don't you find that as shocking? God says, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and offer him as a burnt offering. So Abraham rose early in the morning.
Child sacrifice is like the biggest.
Okay.
Even those days,
Right, so that is shocking, the fact that the idea. But what's also shocking?
The only son.
Your only son, yeah?
Finish his lineage.
Yes, at the end of his lineage.
a huge escalation between the previous house and now.
Well, if I was asked to offer my son, I probably would have slept in.
That's interesting, isn't it? So Abraham rose early in the morning. He got up early. When God told Abraham he's going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, how did Abraham respond? He argued with God. He had a long argument with God about not destroying these wicked cities where all this bad stuff was going on. He argued and argued, got it all the way down from 50 to 10. But he didn't argue with God about sacrificing his son. Why was that?
He understood it was the last chance, maybe.
Why not? Why did he argue about Sodom and Gomorrah?
Is it because he's showing more compassion with regards to Sodom and Gomorrah versus Sodom?
Well, when he was in regards to Sodom and Gomorrah, he challenged God. He says, "Is it right that the innocent should perish together with the guilty? Shouldn't the God of this world be just. In other words, he's telling God it's wrong. In other words, in his depth of his being, Abraham felt this is not right. It's unfair for the innocent to be destroyed together with the guilty. So why didn't he react in that way here?
I think he probably had a guilty conscience from the failure of the offering, basically. That he felt somehow that he was indebted to God in that sense, really. Maybe he felt indebted to God in the sense that he needed to do something right without complaining to really remain on God's side anyway, and come away from Satan's side.
At the end of the day, I think he must have felt this is the right thing to do. At the end of the day, I think he must have felt in his heart of hearts, he must have felt this is the right thing to do. And I'm also sure he must have felt, I don't understand why, but for some reason it's necessary for me to offer my son as a sacrifice. Yeah, he must have...
Why didn't he think the same way about Sodom and Gomorrah? Could he apply that too?
Because in the depth of his being, he felt it was wrong. So, in that sense, he was listening to his conscience. His conscience, somehow, intuition, his heart, told him this is right. Whereas when it came to Sodom and Gomorrah, he felt this is wrong. So in that sense, he's very much in touch with the deeper part of himself. Yeah? He wasn't just making his decisions, intellectually out of his head. It was from his whole being, he felt that's wrong, and he was willing to risk his life arguing with God about it. But here, the depths of his being, he felt, as much as he didn't like to hear it, he felt actually that is the right thing to do. I need to do this. I don't understand why, but it's just something that I need to do in order for... And, he believed in God, he trusted God, he knew God was good. He knew God would never ask him to do something that was wrong. He knew God was trustworthy. And he just, couldn't understand why it was necessary, but he just felt actually it's a necessary thing to do. And so it's like a condition of greater indemnity then. And so it was also, also in that sense a test to see if Abraham loved God more than anything else. So what profession did Abraham's father have?
Idol maker.
He's an idol maker, so he worshipped idols. And so the question is, you can imagine, Abraham must have loved Isaac with his whole heart, with his whole being. You can imagine Abraham would have preferred to kill himself than to kill his son. Yeah? So the question is, did Abraham love and worship Isaac more than he loved and worshipped God? In that sense, had Abraham become like an idol maker, an idolater again. And so he's willing, it's like a sort of test to see if he loved him above everything. And so it took 3 days then to get up, got up early in the morning, took 3 days travel to go to Mount Moriah, which is where the temple of Jerusalem was later built. And then on the way, as I generally understood, Isaac was probably about a teenager. And of course, on the way, Isaac would have said, where is the, what he did say in the Bible, it says, where's the, we got the wood, we got the fire, but where's the offering? And then Abraham said, God will provide the offering. And so Isaac then realized that actually he was the one that was going to be the offering. And so, what did he do? Did he get on the phone and say, child line, please, can I put me through the social services? A serious case of child abuse is about to take place.
But he didn't say, why me, why not Ishmael?
Well, Ishmael was already out of it by then.
Had he already done that?
Yes, yeah. And so Isaac then, also, he must have known what kind of a person his father was. He must have loved his father, must have known his father as a good person, a sincere person, a devout person. And also he must have felt, my dad would never do anything that was wrong. There must be some reason why God has told him to offer me as a sacrifice in order for God's providence to go ahead. He couldn't understand why, but he had this trust and this faith in his father and also in God. And so it's called the binding of Isaac because actually Isaac was bound, his hands and his feet were bound. And in the Talmud it says that Isaac said to Abraham, please bind up my feet and bind up my legs, in case at the last moment I can't control myself and I jump off the altar and I spoil the offering. So please, in case I show any sign of weakness, please bind me, my feet and my legs. So that's sort of, incredible faith. And so Abraham then, was about to kill Isaac, and then an angel intervened and said, do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him, for now I know you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And so at that point, because he was showing this willingness, then it was no longer necessary for God obviously didn't want Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, but he showed that kind of willingness to do so, which is something which is quite extraordinary. And so he didn't need to do that. And so then, through this, then Isaac inherited Abraham's mission. And the angel of the Lord said to Abraham, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you've done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you. And so Isaac then restores Ham's mistake. So if you remember, Ham didn't have this unity of heart with Noah. So Isaac then, having this complete unity of heart with Noah, then he restored Ham's mistake. And so both of them together, they showed absolute love, absolute faith, and absolute obedience. And then together they found there's a ram caught in a thicket, and they went and got the ram, killed it, slit its throat, and together they offered this ram as an offering. So that then became their foundation of faith, their offering which they offered together. And so that's why Jews blow the shofar, this ram's horn, they blow it to remind themselves of that sacrifice. And he brought up Islam, so Muslims believe, the Bible it says that Abraham offered Isaac, or God told Abraham to offer Isaac, and Abraham was willing to offer Isaac. But Muslims believe that Abraham was going to offer Ishmael. Okay, but actually if you look at the Quran doesn't say that. The Quran just says, offer your son. It doesn't say Isaac, it doesn't say Ishmael, it just says offer your son. And so Muslims interpret this to mean Ishmael. So what's going on here, do you think?
The Muslims viewing it that way? Do you mean by the Muslims viewing it in that way?
Well, even though it doesn't say in the Quran, Ishmael, they understand this son was Ishmael. Why do you think that's the case?
Because they're descended from Ishmael.
They're descended from Ishmael, so
It makes sense if the one of their descendants is the one who submits to.
right, it's more prestigious to be descended from the son who's willing to, make that kind of offering of, self-sacrifice. But anyway, as I said, the Bible says Isaac. And so I have come across some Muslims who say, well, actually, the rabbis went and rearranged Genesis. Well, they say that the original text of Genesis said Ishmael, but then they went and rearranged it to say Isaac.
The early Muslims also unsure, right? I mean, it's a later tradition.
Yeah, it's a later tradition, yeah. So anyway, it's interesting.
You know a passage in the Quran that is?
Sorry?
You know which passage in the Quran?
If you've got a Quran, just look it up in the index. I haven't got the reference here. Just look up yeah. Okay, so in that case then, Isaac then inherited Abraham's foundation of faith. And then the next is for the foundation of substance to be established. And so after Sarah died, then Abraham sent his slave or servant back to Haran to get a wife for Isaac. And so he got Rebekah, who was Laban's sister. And she came, and then she was very beautiful. And Isaac and Rebekah really loved each other. There's lots of passages there which talk about that. And then Isaac and Rebekah had, after many, many years, Rebekah became pregnant. And then when she was pregnant, it was incredibly painful for her. And so she prayed to God and said to God, it would have been better not to get pregnant, to have to go through all this incredible pain. And then God said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. and 2 peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the elder shall serve the younger. Okay? The elder shall serve the younger. So you can imagine then, this is the revelation she had, so you can imagine this would have made an incredible impact upon her. Yes? God spoke to her. And so had 2 sons, one called Jacob, and one called Esau. So Esau was the older son, and he's described as being hairy, and Jacob's the younger son, described as being smooth-skinned. So what can you tell about them? Were they identical or non-identical twins? Non-identical, that's right. Okay. Anyway, so also, Rebecca went through the similar kind of experience that Sarah went through. Were you all here when I explained this last week? Was I here last week?
Week before.
Was it the week before I explained this? Were you all here the week before? No? Need to go through it again? Right. Okay. Sorry? Go through it quickly? Anyway, so what happened then is Isaac and Rebekah, they went to a town where the king of Gerar, where Abimelech, who was the king of Gerar, lived, and then they were sitting there, and then Abimelech saw how beautiful Rebekah was, so he invited Isaac and Rebekah to tea. And then Isaac pretended that they were brother and sister. So Abimelech said to Rebekah after tea, "Why would you like to stay the night?" And so Isaac went off, and Rebekah stayed the night. And you can imagine then Rebekah living in this beautiful palace. And you can imagine she went to bed, a lovely feather bed, beautiful silks, a wardrobe full of shoes, maids to do her fingers and everything. And then you can imagine in the middle of the night then, Abimelech came along, knocked on her door, and tried to seduce her. And she had a choice then. Was she going to become the wife of a king and live in a palace? Or was she going to remain the wife of Isaac and live in a tent? Yeah? Anyway, so that was her choice. So just as Lucifer looked much more attractive to Eve than Adam, then Eve gave in to that and became infatuated with Lucifer and went after Lucifer, because he appeared to be much greater, much more powerful, much more knowledgeable than Adam was. And so in order to restore that, women often have to go through the same kind of situation where they have to choose between getting married to a very, very powerful king or very powerful rich person, or remaining faithful to the person they're already married to. So Rebekah had this temptation. She overcame this temptation, and then the next morning God told Abimelech, actually, she is the wife of Isaac, who's my prophet. And then Abimelech felt really shocked, and so he returned Rebekah to Isaac and also gave them lots of wealth. And so this is like restoring the Lucifer, Eve, Adam kind of relationship. So it's to do with the restoration of Eve. The purification of the lineage. So, okay. All right, so Jacob and Esau then, they were quite different characters. And as they were growing up, when they got a bit older, then Isaac, this is a little bit extra bits from the Talmud, Isaac told his sons, when they were getting sort of teenagers, that about the birthright. And they wondered, what was this birthright? And Isaac explained, well, the eldest son is the one who will inherit the birthright. And the birthright means that when I die, he will inherit the land, and also he'll inherit the responsibility of being the head of the family, guiding the family in worship, in prayer, and all these things. And so Esau said, well, I like the idea of getting all the land, but I'm not really keen on all this worshipping God business. Because Esau was the kind of person, he liked to go hunting into the forest, killing animals, and he was that kind of a person, a man's man. Whereas Jacob liked to stay at home, and he liked to be involved in reading the scriptures, not that there were any at that stage, and helping his mum out. And he's a much more a religious kind of person, a very spiritual person.
This is from the Talmud.
Yeah. Anyway, one day, Esau had been out hunting, and he hadn't caught anything, and he was really hungry. So he came home, and he went into the kitchen, and he saw Jacob cooking something on the gas stove, and he said to Jacob, I'm starving, will you give me something to eat? And Jacob said, well, I'm sorry, I can't give you this food because I'm preparing lentil soup for Dad. And Esau said, lentil soup, why do you feed him such rubbishy food? Why don't you give him a decent meal? And Jacob said, well, I'm giving him lentil soup because he's in mourning, because our grandfather Abraham has passed away. And so because he's in mourning, that's why he's eating this very simple food. And Esau sort of, okay. But anyway, would you sell me some, please? And Jacob said, okay, I'll sell it to you. What will you give me? And Esau said, I'll give you my birthright. And Jacob said, fine, okay, I'll take the birthright in exchange for some soup. And so Jacob bought the birthright from Esau.
Did Esau offer it, or did Jacob name it as a price?
This is what he just said. Esau offered it. Because the story goes that there's a bit more conversation in the Talmud that Esau didn't like. You couldn't understand, why does Jacob respect Abraham? Well, Jacob respected, and Isaac respected Abraham because he's a prophet and a religious person. And Esau said, oh, I don't believe in God, or I'm not a religious kind of person, I don't have much respect for that kind of thing, and I don't really have much respect for this birthright because it means that I have to lead the family in prayer and all this sort of thing. Lots of extra kind of conversations. Anyway. So it says in the Bible, thus Esau despised the birthright, didn't really value it. Anyway, so some years later, when they're about 40 years old, then Isaac was going blind at this stage. He's very old, going blind. He was thinking about, well, maybe he's going to die soon. So he decided he wanted to give his blessing to his sons. And he wanted to give his blessing to Esau. So he called Esau in and said to Esau, I want to bless you before I die. But before I give you my blessing, I want you to go out and hunt and bring me my favorite meal. And so Esau said, right, Dad. So off he went, got his bow and arrow, went off into the forest to shoot a deer so he can bring some venison for his dad to eat. But Rebekah overheard this conversation. She overheard Isaac saying this to Esau, and she thought to herself, actually, I think Jacob is the one who deserves to get this blessing. Not Esau, but Jacob deserves to get the blessing. And so she said to Jacob, look, Jacob, Isaac's going to give his blessing to Esau, but you're actually the one that should get this blessing. And so why don't you go and kill a fatted calf, cook the food in the way your dad likes the food, and then come and serve it to him, and then you can be the one that gets the blessing. But Jacob was actually very reluctant to do this. He said, well, if Dad discovers this, he's going to curse me instead of blessing me. So Rebekah said, well, if he does that, then I'll take responsibility, I'll take the blame for it. So Jacob then, he cooked Isaac his favorite meal. He dressed up and put on some animal skins on his arms and everything, and he went in to see Isaac. And Isaac said, who is it? And Jacob said, it's himself. He didn't actually lie. Actually, I need to correct that. If you read the Hebrew, it can be interpreted in a way which actually wasn't a lie. He said, it is I, and Esau is your eldest son. That's one. It can also be, the English though, it's I am Esau. The English, it says, I am Esau, your eldest son, which is obviously which is obviously a lie. But the Hebrew itself can be interpreted that way, but also it can be interpreted, it is I, and Esau is your eldest son.
Two factual statements.
Yes, but the Hebrew itself is ambiguous, so it can be read in either way. So he wasn't telling a lie. What he said was strictly true. If you interpret it one way, but if you interpret it another way, it wasn't true. So in the English, there's no ambiguity, but in the Hebrew, there is ambiguity, because in Hebrew it's just a very different kind of language. Anyway.
By the way, in Genesis it says Jacob suggests to Esau that he's selling his birthright.
All right, okay. Thank you for that. I didn't have time to. I've been out travelling all day. I didn't have time to read it up before I came back in. Okay, so there we go. So what do you think about this then?
Jacob maybe
He's doing what his mother tells him to do, yeah.
He's a 40-year-old man, he's not a boy, right?
Yeah, sure, but you know.
This is a while back.
I mean, if you're 40 years old and you've got a mother who's 65 or 70, she can be pretty persuasive. Still.
One would know.
Sorry?
One would know.
That's right. Anyway, so let's have a look then. So then, this is the blessing that Isaac wanted to give to Esau, but that actually he gave to Jacob. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you, and peoples bow down to you. Be lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. Any thoughts or comments on the nature of that blessing? What's it about? What kind of blessing is it?
It's kind of, well, I'm cheating because I've seen your letter before, but now it's striking me as quite external.
Yeah. In other words, you can have the heavens dew and earth richness and abundance of grain and new wine, so you can be prosperous and wealthy. Nations serve you and peoples bow down to you, so you can have power. Be lord over your brothers, and sons of your mother bow down to you. In other words, your younger brother will bow down to you and respect you. Okay? So it's about wealth and power, isn't it? Basically. Yeah? Okay, anyway, so when Esau came back, he came back with, actually he hadn't been, according to the Talmud, he went out hunting, he couldn't catch anything. On the way home, he was so tired and, fed up. He saw a dog, killed the dog, cooked the dog, and brought the dog, cooked dog in to Isaac to eat, and Isaac smelt it, said that smells like a dog, not venison. And Esau said, eat up, Dad, and then give me the blessing. And then Isaac said, well, who are you? And Esau said, it's me, I'm Esau, your oldest son. And then Isaac said, I've already given you the blessing. And Isaac was really angry and upset and trembled with rage. And then, Esau said, well, haven't you got another blessing for me? And so Isaac gave a blessing to Esau, which is basically to say that his brother would dominate him. And then Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I'll kill my brother Jacob. So what do you think of that? Is that good? No, it's like the Cain and Abel situation again. Cain again wants to kill Abel. So let's go on. So you can see here this mother-son cooperation. What should have happened is Rebecca should have restored Eve and Sarah's role by helping her sons to love each other. Yeah? She should have helped them to get on with each other. But actually, as they were growing up, they argued and they fought and they just didn't get on with each other at all. Yeah? So eventually one wanted to kill the other. So in that sense, Rebecca didn't actually fulfill her role of being able to unite her sons and help to love each other. And which son did she favour?
Jacob, the younger son.
She favoured Jacob, probably based upon this dream. So in that sense, she didn't really love them equally. She favoured one over the other. Anyway, the good thing was she saved Jacob's life by sending him to Haran. And she said to him, look, I don't want you to get killed. I don't want to lose two sons in one day. Please, you go to Haran and stay there for a while. Stay with my brother, your uncle Laban, until Esau cools down. And when he's cooled down, then you can come home again. And so, before Jacob went, he went to see his father. And his father gave him a blessing. So let's have a look then at the blessing that Isaac gave to Jacob. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. May he give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham, so that you may take possession of the land where you now live as an alien, the land God gave to Abraham. So what do you think about this blessing?
The first part of the
Okay, do any of the words there remind you of anything? Yeah, this is exactly. So Isaac then is giving to Jacob the three blessings: be fruitful, multiply, and have dominion over the land. Yeah. Okay, be fruitful, multiply, and have dominion, and also it's a blessing given to Abraham. So you can be the one you're the heir to Abraham. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. So of these two blessings, which one do you think is the most significant? The one that Isaac wanted to give to Esau, or the one that Isaac gave to Jacob? Let's just look at this one again. This one here is about wealth and power. Is there any religious content here? If you look at the language, apart from God in the first sentence, is there any religious language in this? Or spiritual language? Not really, is there? Yeah. Now if you look at this one here, there's a lot of religious language, isn't there? Fruitful, multiply. It's about blessing, about Abraham, in other words, inheriting the blessing that God gave to Abraham. It's about taking possession of the land of Canaan. It's full of religious language. Okay. So, what do you think about this situation then?
Even when Esau asked Isaac, "Do you have another blessing for me?" He still had this one. He still told Esau, "No, I don't have."
Right.
It means he was saving this one just for Jacob.
Yeah. So the way it looks to me is that Isaac thought to himself, right, I've got two sons. I want to give each of my sons a blessing. So he prepared the blessing that he wanted to give to Esau, which is about wealth and power, because he knew that was what Esau was interested in. And he had a second blessing that he wanted to give to Jacob, which was the birthright blessing. This is a birthright blessing, the right to inherit Adam and Abraham's blessing. This is a blessing which is for the person who has a birthright. So Jacob bought the birthright from Esau, and so this is a blessing that goes along with having the birthright. This is like the blessing that's given to the eldest son, or the son who's going to become head of the family. Yeah. So, do you think it was necessary then for Jacob to take Esau's blessing?
No, you mentioned it, no. Sometimes I think that another interference very unnecessary.
Right, so what was going on there then? Why did Rebecca suggest to Jacob that he go and take Esau's blessing?
I mean, well, she had an idea from this prophecy that was given.
Yes.
Whichever form it was. Because after everything happens, the scripture is written in this way. So she, I guess she had this feeling, or maybe the message was conveyed in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe she interpreted it as if she had to make it be that way,
Mm-hmm.
instead of.
So, I mean, who do you think should give the blessing?
Isaac. What do you mean? The father, Isaac, gives the blessing to Esau and Jacob.
Okay, Isaac gave the blessing to Esau and Jacob. Do you think that was right?
That was tradition, right? The father, man, gives the blessing.
Well, two parents give the blessing together.
Yes. So, maybe Isaac and Rebecca should have given the blessing together. So, what do you think? So, what does that suggest then?
It was.
No harm in between Isaac and...
Somehow there's a lack of unity there between Isaac and Rebecca. How can you tell that?
She can communicate her point of view to him.
Right, because Rebecca overheard Isaac saying it. In other words, she was out of the loop. Isaac didn't discuss it with Rebecca beforehand. If Isaac had discussed it with Rebecca beforehand, then Rebecca would have known what was going on. But Rebecca just overheard Isaac saying this to Esau, and then she got the wrong end of the stick. She thought, in the sense that she thought Isaac is going to give the blessing to Esau. She didn't realize Isaac had two blessings to give. Isaac was was no fool. Isaac had worked it all out in his head. He knew Jacob had the birthright. He knew Jacob was the one who was most qualified to receive the birthright blessing of Adam and Abraham, and so he prepared that blessing for Jacob. He also knew what kind of person his oldest son was, and he wanted to give a blessing to his oldest son as well. So he worked it all out in his head, but he hadn't discussed it with Rebecca. And so she misunderstood it. She thought he's just going to give everything to Esau. This is how I understand it. When you unpick it, it looks to me like they hadn't discussed it beforehand. First of all, I think they should have given it together. Secondly, the very fact that she only found out what was happening when she overheard Isaac talking about it meant they hadn't discussed it together. And so I think she misinterpreted what was going on. And so the consequence of this was that Jacob got Esau's blessing. And how did Esau feel about it? Upset. He wanted to kill Jacob. This is almost like Cain almost killed Abel again. And that would have been a complete catastrophe. What's necessary for the foundation of substance is not that Jacob should take Esau's blessing, it's actually that Jacob should win Esau's love and respect, and they should cooperate and work together.
When she got the revelation, the older will serve the younger.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's an Old Testament woman, so she's obviously thinking in terms of like power and domination.
Uh-huh.
And also, she naturally loves Jacob more than Esau. So do you think that she just thought in those terms and not so much enlightened terms?
Anyway, I think she's a wonderful and extraordinary person, but she was also very human. These are extraordinary people, but they're also very human. All the issues and problems and difficulties that we have, they have. So often there's breakdown of communication in the family between a husband and wife and father and mother, and that's often the issues, with them as well as it is for us.
Do you think it was unusual for husbands to give the blessing without their wife's present in those days? I mean, I assume it wasn't just their family, it was like that was the done thing.
I don't know, but all I can say is, obviously they weren't communicating, because Rebecca didn't know about it without overhearing it. So there's obviously a lack of communication. They didn't wake up in the morning together and start to get the day with prayer. What are we going to do today? Well, I would like to give Esau my blessing today. Oh, well, what are you going to, etc., etc., etc. Yes? That's why it's always good, wake up, start the day together, prayer and discussion. What are we going to do today? Or what are we going to do this week? Or what are we going to do this month? That's why, sort of thing one does at Pledge. Beginning of the day, beginning of the week, beginning of the month, beginning of the year. You talk about what do we want to accomplish and do today, this week, this month, this year. Yeah, so you can work together.
I'm sorry to bring this up, especially maybe on camera, but our church just teaches this part of the divine principle, like, well, Rebecca was supposed to deceive Esau, and
right.
did him in that kind of way.
Well, I know. I think
this is a very enlightened way of explaining it.
I think it's okay. So I'll tell you how I think. Okay, this is what did happen. Then we have to think, just because it did happen, should it have happened like this? And that's what, sometimes you think, oh, this is because it happened like this, therefore it's supposed to happen like this. But let's try and think, how else could it have happened? What else could have gone on? So how did Jacob get the birthright? He bought it. Okay? So did Esau respect Jacob, do you think? What should have happened?
Like King Sejong.
Yes. So what should have happened is that Esau should have given the birthright to Jacob. Can you imagine that happening? Okay, so let's think about it. There are times in history where this sort of thing has happened. One is with King Sejong. I'll tell you about King Sejong. He was a Korean king who became a king, and he created the Korean alphabet. But who normally becomes the king?
First son.
Usually the first or the eldest son. But Sejong was actually the third son. He had 2 older brothers. So normally, they should become the king before him. But what happened is this. The 2 older brothers, they used to have conversations amongst each other, and they said to each other, actually, out of the 3 of us, Sejong is the most qualified to become the next king. He's the one who's the wisest, the most intelligent, the best person, this, and this. All these qualities. Actually, he's much more qualified to become the king than us. But the reality is that when Dad dies, I'm going to become the king. And if I die, you're going to become the king. And Sejong's not going to become the king. So for the sake of the country, actually it's better if we get ourselves disqualified from becoming the next king. And so what happens, the two older sons, they behaved so badly at the court that one was exiled, well, they were both exiled, and one left the country, and the other one went and became a Buddhist monk. And so when the father died, Sejong became the next king. Yes? That's how it happened for that. Remarkable. Also, a similar thing happened with David and Jonathan, which we'll look at later. So what should have happened here is that Jacob should have behaved as such a good younger brother and really admired and loved his older brother, but also been so wise that his older brother would have thought to himself, Esau should have thought to himself, wow, Jacob's amazing. He's such a loving brother, he really loves me and really respects me, but actually he's so intelligent and so wise. I think he would become a better head of the family when Isaac dies. And so he should have given his birthright to Jacob, because he should have done that. So what should have happened is Jacob, for the foundation of substance, Cain has to love Abel. In order for Cain to love Abel, what does Abel need to be? Lovable. Exactly. So Jacob should have become lovable. Yes? And then so Esau would have loved him. Also, Cain has to listen to Jacob, okay, and respect him. So Abel has to be respectable. So Jacob then needed to be lovable, easy for his older brother to love him. He has to be easy for his older brother to respect him, because on the one hand he kept his position as a younger brother, but also had all these amazing ideas, etc., etc. And also then Cain is supposed to follow Abel. So in order for Esau to follow Jacob had to be lovable, easy to respect, and so that Esau would have thought, wow, we can do stuff together. So for example, Esau used to enjoy going hunting. And actually Jacob was much cleverer. So if Jacob, as a younger brother, said, wow, I really love you, Esau, but actually I had this idea. Look, what do you think about this as another way of trapping an animal? Yes? In other words, offered these ideas to Esau. And Esau thought, that's a great idea, let's go and do it together. And so together they could have done all sorts of things. Yeah? In that sense, Jacob needed to win Esau's respect. And then he would have got the birthright, and then things would have turned out very differently. Yeah? But actually, Jacob bought the birthright, and the principle says he was very clever. He cleverly bought the birthright. In other words, he's a clever, what do you call it? A clever dick. He tricked him, but he didn't win his heart. He didn't win his respect. Yeah? And so later on Esau felt really hard done by. And so when Esau found that Jacob had taken his blessing, he said, he's taken my birthright and now he's taken my blessing. So he felt really, hard done by that he'd sold his birthright for, a bowl of lentil soup.
So originally, even though Lucifer was proud, if some time had passed without the fall, Adam would have become perfect and become so impressive, Lucifer would have admired him more and more.
Absolutely.
And would have been happy to follow him rather than...
Of course, yes. Yes.
So that's the original things being restored.
Yes. And that's what should have happened. And then Lucifer should have been the one to say to God, actually, Adam and Eve were qualified and ready to get married. But because they gave in to his temptation, of course, he couldn't respect them. But if they resisted the temptation, his respect for them would have grown more and more and more. And eventually, he would have...
His jealousy and resentment would have been nothing compared to his admiration for them.
He wouldn't have felt jealous or resentful anymore, because he would have felt completely satisfied in love. He would have felt completely loved by Adam and Eve. So they would have subjugated. Paul talks about natural subjugation of Satan takes place through love. So through Adam and Eve should have loved Lucifer into submission. Yeah? So that's what Jacob should have done to Esau as well. Then things would have turned out very differently. So Jacob, he needed to get the birthright, and then he needed to get the blessing that goes along with the birthright. right? But he didn't need to get Esau's blessing, because by taking Esau's blessing, all he did is he made Esau so angry and upset he wanted to kill him. Yes? If he hadn't taken Esau's blessing and just taken his own blessing, then, he wouldn't have got in a situation where he almost got himself killed. Okay? And so Jacob then sets off for Haran. On the way to Haran, he has this dream and of Jacob's ladder, and God says to him, "I am the Lord. I'll give you and your descendants the land on which you're lying." It's the same blessing that God gave to Isaac and Abraham. "Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth. All the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring, and I'll bring you back to this land." And so he goes off to Haran. Okay, it's 8:10, so I'm not going to finish this. 9:10, 8:09. So, anyway, I don't want to rush through it, so better just go through it slowly, and this is now about the time I would have finished anyway, normally. So.
Are we having a lecture next week? 21st of December?
What's the date next week?
21st of December.
21st?
Yes.
So, next week, but not the week after. Not the 28th.
I want to ask you, because you just mentioned the Swiss lecture, when did Korea's monarchy end?
Where do what?
When did Korea's monarchy end?
Korea's monarchy?
Yes.
In about 1910?
Yeah, because I tell you one thing, I don't know what, I don't know thinking about it, last couple of days, that, when Jesus came, Israel had a monarchy. And the monarchy, when the king had, that there was a king, he became rather jealous, and he ended up killing about 2 million firstborn children, like this, for that time. So, is it possible that the Korean monarchy had to end because God saw what happened the last time when there was a king on the Israeli throne, and then now he will send the Messiah, and the king might begin to struggle again when the Messiah came anyway, you understand what I mean?
I understand what you mean.
Yeah, there needed to be democracy. There needed to be democracy.
Korea was basically a very, very feudal country.
Yes.
And there was no democratic element at all. Ideally, I think, if Korea had reformed for a few hundred years before the 20th century and introduced welcomed Christianity, introduced democratic elements, I don't think there would have been a problem having a king of Korea in a constitutional democracy like we have in this country. It's not a problem. And then maybe father could have married into the family and become the next king of Korea. I don't know. Who can tell?
But also in the time of Jesus, if you read the Bible carefully, Herod's father was a bad guy. And Herod himself, he wasn't the great guy, but actually he was sometimes moved by John the Baptist's words.
That Herod, yeah.
And so actually there was if John the Baptist united with Jesus and they approached Herod in a subtle way, you can see from the Bible that he did have, even though he was a bad guy, he had some kind of conscience that was sensitive to God's truth. And there was a chance that he could have been converted.
Yeah, it's always possible. In Israel at the time of Jesus, wasn't a Jewish monarchy in that sense. It's basically they were just people installed by the Romans. Herod the Great himself, he got his position because the Roman emperor gave him that job. It wasn't in that sense a part of the lineage of the house of David or anything. It's not really comparable. Yeah.
Do you also go on?
It's not. It's different. So is that okay? It's more.
Yeah, let's go. Okay. Yeah. Please.
So it's a story of Jacob and Esau, and we kind of discussed about what should have happened, and it makes me think, if people do the best possible thing in the situation, then they restore
the maximum. So if it had gone the way we had hypothesized, then maybe Jesus could have come much sooner.
Maybe.
But the way it's portrayed in the Bible, like it was kind of it's put away like it was meant to go that way, that Jacob went to his uncle Laban and was cheated, and he had to go through all these trials and then come eventually 21 years later and vow in front of his brother to restore them. Now, after going through what should have happened, it seems more like that was to restore the way things weren't done properly and handing over the birthright.
Yes.
And it may have restored something between Jacob and Esau, but didn't really restore very much, because in the end they didn't work together afterwards.
Yeah.
Although he came back and Esau didn't want to kill him, but they didn't.
Right. So we'll talk about it next week. They met. There was a reconciliation, but then they went their own way, and then from Jacob came the Jewish people, from Esau came the Edomites, and it says they were often enemies. So
Esau did invite him, right? After he forgave him, he invited him, come with me.
yes, and Jacob didn't want to,
Right.
because that period, that time was gone. So Esau wasn't living in Canaan. Esau was living outside Canaan. He was living in the land of Seir, which was on the east bank of the Dead Sea. Whereas Jacob wanted to go and live in Canaan. And also, it's like a lot of water passed under the bridge.
But actually, it's interesting. Isaac's blessing, which was intended for Esau, did come true, because in that blessing he says, "Your brothers will bow down to you."
Well, that's right. We'll look at this next week. But actually, at the point of reconciliation, then Jacob returned the blessing that he'd stolen or he'd taken from Esau. He gave it back to Esau. So even though Rebecca had this dream, the elders shall serve the younger. What was it, the dream again?
One will be stronger than the other. The younger shall.
The elder will serve the younger.
Was that, yeah. But actually, in reality, Jacob was the one who bowed down to Esau 7 times. And so Jacob then was, Esau never bowed down to Jacob. It's a momentary reconciliation, and then they went their separate ways. So they didn't really unite and make a proper foundation of faith, in the sense that, of Esau really loving Jacob and respecting him and doing stuff together. It never got to that point.
But do you think they, in a restorational sense, that they had restored a little bit more?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Absolutely, definitely. Well, again, we'll look at this next week. So, Jacob got the birthright, which is important, but he wasn't able to establish a proper foundation of substance together with Esau. And so there was a reconciliation, and then they went their separate ways.
So are you saying that, again, I'm using small language here, but there's no principled element to saying that Jacob was supposed to deceive Esau and steal his blessing?
I mean, if you look at the divine principle itself, it doesn't say that. The divine principle itself doesn't talk about anything about him taking Esau's blessing. It just says he needs to get the birthright, and then it says he took Esau's blessing. He took the blessing, and God didn't bless Esau. But unfortunately, for some reason, I don't know why, nobody has ever noticed this blessing before. It's not in the divine principle. Father never mentions it. None of the other church leaders have ever mentioned this blessing. Well, I think it's the more significant.
Yeah, it's the first one is emphasizing the principle, right?
Right, definitely. So usually when people talk, they say Jacob needed to get the blessing from Isaac, as if there was one blessing, the blessing. But actually, if you read it, there were 2 blessings. There was a blessing for Esau and a blessing for Jacob. And I think Jacob should have got his blessing, and I think Esau should have got his blessing, and Jacob should have got his blessing. And then, why not? Getting Esau's blessing is not about the foundation of substance. The foundation of substance is about winning Esau's love and respect and uniting together. By taking Esau's blessing, it made it much more difficult to establish the foundation of substance, because now Esau wants to kill him. Yes, he doesn't love him, he doesn't respect him, he's absolutely not going to do anything together with him. Yeah? So actually, by taking Esau's blessing, he almost made it impossible to make the foundation of substance. He almost got himself killed. Because if he hadn't taken Esau's blessing, Esau wouldn't have got so upset. And then it may be together, instead of spending 21 years in Haran, he might have spent 21 years, let's see if we can, get some unity going together here.
The language is very strong in the prophecy. One is stronger, one is weaker, one will serve. Even with Perez in the womb, it's talking about power. Like one they wrestle in the womb, and it's like force and power.
Yeah.
The satanic mindset is using force and power. But actually, the language even suggests that. So it's not surprising that.
Well, what should have happened is the elder shall serve the younger. That's what should have happened. If the foundation of substance had been established, then yes, Esau would have realized Jacob is etc., 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 and I want to help him and serve him because I really respect him and I love him. Yes, I think he'll become the better head of the family than me. But that prophecy that Rebecca had was never fulfilled because Esau never served Jacob.
When did she get this prophecy? Does it say what meaning it was through? It was just through a dream?
No, well,
Was it through an angel? Or?
it just says that God spoke to her.
Could have just had a dream.
Yeah. Maybe it's a dream, maybe it's an angel, maybe it's the voice of God. She's talking to God about why is it so painful having been pregnant, and then God spoke to her and said this to her. 2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the elder shall serve the younger. But the reality is the elder never did serve the younger. Esau never did serve Jacob.
I also think there's a problem with language because in the fallen world, language takes on a different meaning, but in heaven it's not always the same meaning. For example, in the fallen world, there's a subject and an object, and usually like a king or a dictator is the subject, and the subject desires the object to obey him and also serve him. But in the kingdom of heaven, the way it works is the subject serves the object, and the object obeys the subject. So, for example, parents serve their children, and children obey them. So an older brother would serve a younger brother, and a younger brother would follow and listen to and obey his older brother. So actually, from a fallen world point of view, to be told you're going to serve this person is an insult. But from a heavenly point of view, to be told you're going to serve this person is like saying you're an older brother position or a mature subject or a parent. So to be prophesied that Esau would serve Jacob, seen from a heavenly point of view, is not that terrible thing.
That's not a problem at all. The point is that Jacob, though, needed to win his older brother's respect, and he needed to win the love and respect of his older brother, and sadly he didn't do that. And he tricked him and deceived him and made himself less lovable and less respectable, and then he had to go away for 21 years to be deceived himself many times, to suddenly come to realize, actually, no wonder Esau was so upset with me. It's not very nice being tricked. Yeah? And then he realized, actually, I behaved badly to my brother. Yeah?
It took him 21 years to figure that out.
Some people never do. I mean, I told you about Lucien and Clement Freud. Did I?
No.
Yeah, Lucien and Clement Freud.
Is that 2 people?
They're 2 brothers.
I know Lucien Freud is the psychologist, right?
No, Lucien Freud...
Sigmund Freud.
Okay, so they're the grandchildren, I think, of Sigmund. Anyway, so Lucien Freud is a very renowned painter, very famous painter, extraordinary paintings. Clement Freud was an MP, Liberal MP. He was a cook, on television before Jamie Oliver, and also on the radio a lot. Anyway, it's my generation, not yours. Anyway, they're both very, very famous. They were brothers. Anyway, about 3 years ago, Lucien Freud died. And people were shocked that Clement didn't go to his brother's funeral. And then the story came out, Clement, why didn't you go to your brother's funeral? Well, why should I? But he's your brother. We haven't spoken since we were 15. That's what happened. When they were teenagers, the story came out later. When they were teenagers, there was something that they got into some kind of squabble or disagreement about something, and they never spoke to each other again. And then as the years went by, it became even more difficult to contact each other. And so there was, I guess they were in the 70s, 80s when they died, maybe for 60 years, these two brothers hadn't spoken to each other, hadn't called each other, hadn't visited each other. They had no feeling for him. Didn't feel like, this is my brother, I should go to his funeral. It was just like, it's no different to anybody else. Yeah. These things happen. And that, it's a classic kind of story. And Clement said, I can't even remember what it was that we argued about. It was just, couldn't even remember what the issue was anymore. It's just, they just drifted apart, yeah? So it's very easy for that to happen and not to try to reconcile. And so that was, obviously there's some issue here between Jacob and Esau. Jacob went away, and they could have just stayed away. But later on he decided he wanted to make it up with Esau. He felt it was important for him to restore what he had done wrong, to go home and make it up with Esau, to go and apologize, to do what was necessary to restore the relationship. He felt, that was important, something he had to do.
Is it conceivable that the person in able position does it the wrong way, but for some miraculous reason, the person in Cain position decides, even though my brother tricked me, I'm still going to do God's providence and love him and serve him.
Sure, yeah.
Of course, I don't think it happens, but
yeah.
it could happen if that did happen.
Sure, these things happen, yeah.
So even in our church life in the past, we talked about able figures. Sometimes you might have an able figure who's a bit of a meanie, not necessarily internally like an able type person, but members are encouraged to be faithful to them.
Well, maybe that person's not an able figure then. Maybe it's just the leader, and Cain.
Yeah. But I mean, so providentially speaking, Jacob was the leader of the providence to Esau.
Yeah, but generally speaking, Cain is older than Abel. So generally speaking, in the church, the leader is Cain, and the younger members Abel. That's the basic principle. If you're a leader, it means you're older, it means you've been in the church longer, which means basically you're Cain.
That's what Father said in his speech.
And if you're just joined, and you don't know anything, you're Abel. Yeah? That's the principle. Cain is older than Abel, generally. So what's easier? Is it easier for a young member to listen to a church leader, or for a church leader to listen to a young member? Sorry?
I have to ask a young member and a church leader that.
Well, what do you think? Just imagine. What's easier?
It's easier for a young person to listen to.
It is. It's easier for a young brother to listen to an older brother. That's natural. Okay, it's easier for Abel to listen to Cain. It's easy. He's older, he's been around longer, etc. It's much more difficult the other way around. It's much more difficult for a church leader to listen to somebody who just joined. Not just in the church, anywhere, because what do young people like usually?
Immature.
Sorry?
Immature.
Bullish.
Yeah, a bit immature, yes, but often quite enthusiastic, a little bit idealistic. And if you've been around a long time, what are you more like? Realistic, bit cynical. And it's very easy if somebody comes along with lots of new ideas. Oh, well, you just don't understand, you'll learn, just put you down. You know what I mean? That's like Cain killing Abel, yes? And it's very easy to be like that when you get older, to think, oh, well, they're just full of all this, innocent enthusiasm, they'll grow out of it one day. As opposed to they're so enthusiastic, maybe, I should, associate with them a bit more and to lose some of my old cynicism.
I remember your father mentioned that in a speech once. It was like, when new members join, and older members say, oh, they're new, they'll calm down. And he was kind of like chastising this mentality.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's absolutely wrong.
Yes. And so, as I said, the basic rule is the leader's Cain. So the whole idea, this is my able figure, is completely a misunderstanding of the principle. The leader's Cain, the older one is Cain, as a basic, it's the basic standpoint.
As he told me, many of the amazing projects Father has started, he took suggestions from younger members.
Yes.
Of course, he's old now, so almost everybody's younger than Father, but many of the great projects he started, his ideas, he listened to younger members.
Sure.
And he said, he recognized that's a great idea.
Yes.
He didn't say, I'm the Messiah, how
That's right. Yes. So a father's a very humble person. If you're very humble, you recognise truth wherever it comes from. It may be somebody you really don't like, but they may come up with a good idea. And so you should feel, well, even though I don't like you, actually that's a good idea. You know? As opposed to, well, because it's you, then it's obviously a bad idea. Which is so easy to do that, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So a humble person says, well, I may have difficulties with you, but actually it's a good idea. So, and that's what it is to be humble, to recognise truth for its own sake, and irrespective of whether the person somebody you like or not. Anyway, so this is just my own experience. The years of being a church leader, I felt basically I'm Cain of Cains. Sorry?
I'm paying for the first time because when leaders think they are able figures, when in fact they are A figures.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So the leader, the church leader, with certain responsibility, one can never, one has to respect this person is the one who is a leader, or the one who is responsible. Yeah? But, maybe that person might be able to you, but maybe they're not. But the person, if you have that kind of position, you shouldn't think, well, because I have this position, therefore I am able. And you shouldn't think that person is necessarily your able figure. Your able figure is something you decide yourself in your heart of hearts. You feel, actually, this person is closer to God than me. This is somebody through whom I need to learn. And it may be your church leader. It may be a tramp you meet on the street. It could be anybody. It could be a particular book that you're reading. Wow, this is amazing. I need to learn from this.
So we use this kid and because lots of problems that for years.
Yeah, it has completely.
I'm hearing it for the first time now. Really, first time I'm hearing this.
I gave a long talk about it a few weeks ago. Did you miss that one?
I probably might have
I think you missed that one. It's online if you want to watch it. I talked about it for.
I looked it up.
We use skin and able to cause problems in that
Yeah.
Lots of problems.
I looked it up and Father said something interesting. He said, vertically, younger members are able and older members are Cain. And horizontally, older members are able and younger members are Cain. And I think what he means by that is, if you're older, you have more experience about running things, and so in that way, you can give some wisdom to the younger members.
Sure.
But as far as your purity and enthusiasm for God and zeal for God,
Yeah.
the younger member is more likely to be stronger in that. So vertically.
Yeah, so that's what I said before. You may be able in one thing, but Cain in another thing. You may be better at playing tennis. In that sense, you're able, and that person can learn from you. Whereas in a different sport, it may be the other way around. Or in a religious life, it may be the other way around. And so, it just varies. Depends on the circumstances, the situation. Some things one might be able, the other person's Cain. Might be the complete opposite way around. In a different circumstance, a different situation. It's just something flexible. And so the key then is to try and be sensitive to where is God working? Through whom is God working? Through whom is God speaking? Yes, just because one's a leader doesn't mean one has a monopoly on God. Nobody has a monopoly on God. Not even the Messiah has a monopoly on God. God is able to speak and work wherever he wants to.
But this sense that because someone's a leader, they're able is still completely prevalent in our church, isn't it?
Yes.
And even though I think you showed me a quote where Father said, it's an evil philosophy that our church members are teaching that the leader is able.
He didn't say evil, but certainly says wrong, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I went through all these quotes a few weeks ago. Yeah, there's loads of them. You can look at all Father's quotes about Cain and Abel, but never, ever will you find he says, the church leader's able, therefore you have to follow the church leader. Doesn't say that. Yes.
So you're on a different note about Isaac.
Yes.
And there's also been some popularization of this term in terms of, something that you feel is precious to you and that you would rather keep than to, sacrifice in God's name or to go in that sort of direction. What do you think about that?
Well, again, it's something that it's not somebody can tell you that. It becomes an abuse when people say, well, you have to do it because it's your Isaac. This is something that you feel from God directly. You may feel from God, actually, it's necessary for me to do this, But at the end of the day, The important thing is, did Abraham kill Isaac? No. That's the thing. Abraham did not sacrifice Isaac. Yes?
He was willing to do it.
It was only the willingness. He didn't actually do it. Whereas often people say, actually, it's not just the willingness, you actually have to do it.
So what do you think about, what do you think about someone, say, giving up their studies to do, the typical case would be to do another year of SDF, and they're told, this is the wrong thing to do because it's your Isaac?
I think that's something that a person needs to work out themselves in their heart of hearts. I think it's a violation of somebody's inner life to tell them that and to say that. That's something everybody has to work out for themselves.
But also, isn't it just crazy just to say, because this is precious to you, you have to trash it? Let's do it without any context.
Well, yes.
Just the idea that if it's precious to you, you've got to get rid of it. That's just
Well,
itself is just...
Well, I agree. As I said, I don't think people should... I think it's a misuse of power to do that.
Yeah.
Misuse of the principle to go around telling people that.
Then also what you could use that thing for, potentially, if, say, for example, studying, you could go on to have greater influence in society.
Sure. So, I think... if you want to study and you love studying, you should really study. That's what God wants you to do. But at the same time, you should always be aware that, to love God more than that. That's all it is, really. It's not that God doesn't... As I said, God...